Where does life take you once your Chevrolet Cavalier takes a crap? Well, it's only up from here, and you start off with the 2010 Mazda 3i. Back in January, I filmed a 1997 Chevrolet Cavalier Z24, and I straight up called it a garbage car. Even if it wasn't falling apart, the steering threatening to give out at any moment, and the brakes doing what they wanted when they pleased, the sentiment still holds true. Cavaliers, especially third generation ones, were far down below on the compact car spectrum. A true rock bottom. Shortly after filming, my friend Brent finally gave up on that crap wagon and came into possession of this 2010 Mazda 3i. Yes, it's a base Model 3 from almost a decade ago, but this is by far a much better choice for his almost hour and a half commute to work every day. Mazda was formed in 1920 as the Toyo Cork Kogyo Company Limited, shortened to Toyo Kogyo Company Limited in 1927, and produced its first vehicle in 1931. This vehicle was a three-wheeled rickshaw known as the Mazda Go. The Mazda name was derived from the Zoroastrian god of light Ahura Mazda and the company's founder, Jujiro Matsuda. The company would produce weapons for the Japanese military in World War II, and following the war would eventually produce its first car, the Mazda R360 Coupe, in 1960. The company would soon start dabbling with Wankel rotary engines throughout the 1960s and 70s in a partnership with the German automaker NSU. But early troubles would regulate the rotary engines to low-volume sports cars eventually. The key event being the Arab oil embargo of 1973, which spelled doom for the all-Wankel lineup as folks were seeking out fuel-efficient vehicles overnight. Wankels, despite their small, compact design, are far from efficient. Soon after the verge of bankruptcy, Mazda entered a partnership with the Ford Motor Company, a marriage that would prove long and fruitful for both companies. On top of providing Ford with select subcompact and compact models for rebadge for the American market, Mazda would also co-develop Ford's compact Ranger truck and the original Explorer. When it came time to replace its Protégé compact, Mazda's new model would feature architecture that would share with both Ford and Volvo, Ford's then new C1 platform. While the Protégé, or 323 depending on the time or place you lived, was a bit derivative in styling, the first generation 3 saw Mazda break away with its swoopy design language that would only exemplify over each subsequent generation. The new 3 was a smashing success for the company, which had faced hardships in the 1990s due to the Japanese bubble economy bursting. By the time the second generation, known internally as BL, came about in 2009 with its refreshingly happy face, Mazda was making all the right moves with its cars. The BL Mazda 3 in America came in two body styles, a sedan and a 5-door hatchback. There was the base I that came with the 2-liter MZR-L i4 that produced 150 horsepower and 135 foot-pounds of torque. The S model that came with the 2.5-liter MZR-L5 i4 that produced 167 horsepower and 168 foot-pounds of torque. Partial zero-emission vehicle versions of both engines that sacrificed a touch of power in favor of efficiency. The Skyactiv G 2.0 liter that came out in 2012 that would lead the way to Mazda's next generation of engines that exist today. And the Mazda Speed 3, a hot hatch favorite for enthusiasts that use the 2.3-liter MZR-L DISI straight forward, a screamer that produces 263 horsepower and 280 foot-pounds of torque. I models, such as this one, got a 5-speed manual, while higher trims got a 6-speed manual. If shifting isn't your cup of tea, then a 5-speed automatic would be your choice. Power is then directed to the front wheels. All-wheel drive would not be available until the 4th generation was introduced in 2019. The front is suspended via McPherson struts and coils, while the rear uses a Ford-designed E-Link independent suspension. The 2010 Mazda 3 had truly stepped out from the crowd with its polarizing Nagari design language. First seen on the RX-8 Sports Coupe, the BL3 sort of became a punching bag in the car world with its quote-unquote famous smile. It's a happy car! But as cars increasingly got including the most recent three, one has to applaud Mazda for bucking the trend and going for happy. Come on, you can't not like this face. One thing that the design struggles at, though, is the overall size of the car. The second generation 3 was still one of the smallest entries in the compact class at the time. This comes at the cost of the back seat. I sat there, and I did not fit. I honestly don't know if I'd put children back there. It's just that small. Trunk space, however, is decent as my fat ass fits in there comfortably well. Out on the road, it's, fine. Just fine. The base 2-liter does an adequate job of getting power to the ground. It's no Zoom Speed 3 or even a 2.5 model, but it's fine for a basic economy car. In corners, it's light and tossable and inoffensive, as it should be for an econobox, which is light years ahead of where the owner's Cavalier was. The seats are definitely for someone with a little bit of smaller frame than I, but they're fine for the small trip we took. They are a touch on the narrow side, just below my shoulders, which I do see a problem for potentially long trips, but I'm a bigger guy. That's just what I have to live with. And finally, there's the clutch feel. The pedal feels about non-existent, and the lack of torque from the 2-liter becomes apparent. Like the modified Del Sol, I felt like I had to really abuse the clutch and rev it kind of high just to get it to shift smoothly. There's no creeping onto the gas in this car. There's no second gear starts in this car. First gear every time and keep your revs up. This is quite a different experience than my old Saturn Ion from the first episode of this show, which, despite being a 2-liter 4-cylinder itself, seemingly had enough low-end torque of its own that you could lug the engine at low RPMs, and the pedal feel was actually quite a bit for a little car. The Mazda, however, refuses to do that. As mentioned before, this car replaces a car I reviewed at the start of the year. Brent, the owner, said that the Cavalier video was one of the last times that car had even left the yard. Despite his work on the brakes, the car was quickly falling apart and repair bills were starting to far outweigh the total cost of the car, which I don't blame him. The Mazda, for the meantime, is the efficient and reliable econobox he needs for his 84.5-mile commute. Yes, the Mazda is a base model. Actually, a former rental car at that. And there are a couple of issues that he's living with. The dash is suffering from what he calls the Melton Mazda dash, in which the harsh North Carolina sun has made the dash, well, kind of soft and sticky 10 years later. Then there's the parasitic draw that he can't seem to find. Leave it parked for a week, like he typically does as he's a truck driver, and the battery will soon be drained to the point that the car won't start. So he's installed a battery cutoff switch to avoid that issue for the time period. But other than that, he likes the car. It's miles ahead of where the Cavalier was, and it does what it needs to do. Despite the second generation 3 continuing to share the Ford C1 platform, Mazda was pretty much on its own by the time the second generation 3 came out. Due to the global recession of 2008 that rocked the automotive world, Ford cut its ownership of the company from 33.4% to just 3% by the end of 2010. There was no new father corporation, as Mazda was buying its own shares back. Then, due to Ford's own stocks rapidly falling in 2015, Mazda went ahead and bought the remaining shares, becoming a fully independent automaker. Nowadays, Mazda has been doubling down on its Skyactiv technologies, and an initiative to make its car more and more fuel efficient, with traditional internal combustion engines, diesel engines, hybrids, and CVT transmissions. Even more recently, Mazda has even entered a partnership with Toyota, which allows Mazda to sell Toyota some of its technologies for some cold hard cash that the little company desperately needs. Unlike other Japanese manufacturers post-American ownership in the late 2000s, like Isuzu and Suzuki, who flat out stopped selling cars in the United States, and Mitsubishi, who's barely keeping itself afloat, Mazda seems to be doing okay for itself. Which is good, because we could always use plucky little cars like the 2010 Mazda 3i. And unlike the 1997 Chevrolet Cavalier Z24, this Mazda 3i is exactly what a cheap commuter car should be. Efficient and reliable, and maybe a little fun to drive. The owner got it at a good price, well under market value for one in fair condition. So here's hoping that it lives up to that promise. I've been at the mercy of unreliable cars before, and words cannot describe how it feels to have something you can depend on once you replace a lemon. This Mazda 3i isn't a Mazda Speed 3, and it isn't even a hatch for those cool kid points. What it does do well is get from point A to point B, as sometimes that's all a car needs to be. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for watching another episode of Wookie Drives. Once again, thank you to Brent of Pleasant Garden, North Carolina for driving all the way to Statesville to allow me to film your car. If you have a car you'd like to see on the show, you can get a hold of me two different ways. Either DM my Twitter at WookieAutomoTV, or go to the official Facebook page at facebook.com/WookieDrives and leave a message there. I will try to respond as quickly as possible, and we'll try to schedule something. Specifically, I'm looking for cars in the Iredell County, North Carolina area, as I'm currently based in Statesville, which is about 40 miles north of Charlotte, for those asking. Anyways, be sure to like the video, leave a comment, and any feedback is good feedback, as I'm always trying to improve the channel. Also, hit that subscribe button for more Wookie shenanigans. Thank you for watching another Wookie Drives, and have a good night.
Hurry back, Jack!
Hey, you got it!
Yeah.
Let me take it for a spin.
Mazda introduces a new car that's not expensive. It's just engineered to feel that way. It's the new Mazda 323.
It's got this really great warranty.
Hurry back, Jack. Hurry back, Jack.
The new 323 from Mazda.
It just feels right.
Hey, what's with the water?